Hello and welcome to this webinar presented by Compass Go, Mental Health and Wellbeing Training Level 2, Early Identification and Intervention. Thank you very much for taking the time out to be here today and to watch this webinar series. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Compass Go. Compass Go is a mental health support team that works with children, young people, families and education settings across North East Lincolnshire to help promote mental health and provide interventions, support and advice to all different people across the county. Our team is made up of a variety of practitioners from all different backgrounds, so collectively Compass Go has a vast knowledge base and it means we can provide the best intervention possible to the young people in the area. Our work with education staff includes providing advice and support to help them promote mental health and emotional wellbeing within their settings, and also to help upskill them so they can provide some very basic information and interventions to young people so that young people are getting the best support at all times. When supporting young people, we deliver one-to-one interventions, group interventions and workshops and assemblies, depending on what the young person needs at that specific time. If you'd like to find more information about what Compass Go can do and how we can help you, then please do visit the link on the screen. So as a service, we offer 2 levels of training. Level 1, which you should have already done, is designed to empower all education staff to feel more upskilled and more knowledgeable around some very basic mental health awareness and emotional wellbeing concerns. It was designed to help build skills and develop knowledge so that you as education staff feel more confident to deliver interventions and support young people in your care. Therefore, it enables education staff to improve and strengthen the support that young people get from them directly. This training, the level 2, is a bit more of a deep dive into mental health difficulties, and we provide some more key skills from a cognitive behavioural therapy approach. It's been designed for those staff who wish to further enhance their knowledge so that they can improve their daily practice when working with young people and families. It's not just about furthering knowledge, it's about acquiring skills and learning how to assess needs on a very basic level so that you can acquire more evidence-based tools to implement into the work that you do daily. Now, if you have not done so already, we would be very grateful if you could complete the pre-session questionnaire. Now, you only need to do one of these for the entire webinar series. There is a post-session questionnaire as well, which will need to be done at the end of each webinar, but we'll explain more about that once we come to the end of the webinar. The pre-session one helps us to understand your current knowledge and where you're currently at before you complete the webinar series, and we only need you to do one. So if you've already done it, fantastic, we can move on. But if you haven't done so, take some time now just to quickly complete that. It should only take you a couple of minutes. The training series is made up of 5 individual webinars, each one designed in order so that they follow on from each other. However, you are able to dip in and out of them as needed. So if something crops up, feel free to pause the webinar, come back to it at a later date, or if you've only got 10 minutes, try webinar 3. It's a 10-minute webinar in its own right. But we would advise you to try and do them in order as possible so the information flows. We've designed a workbook to go alongside this webinar series so that you have something that you can use to further enhance all your knowledge and understanding as we go along. But also it contains key information so that you don't have to worry about taking notes throughout the whole webinar series and miss bits of information as the practitioners talk. We've done the hard work for you. But it also contains note pages so that you've got it all in one place and you can scribble down some extra bits of information if you want to from the slides or from what the practitioners are talking about. But also as we go through the webinar, you will be asked to complete activities. Now the activities are in the workbooks, therefore you need the workbook in order to be able to complete the activity. We would encourage you to complete the activities as you go along. It'll help solidify any knowledge and understanding, and also means that you have the most up-to-date information because some of them are fill-in-the-blank activities and we haven't given you the answers in the booklet. The most important thing to remember when you're completing this webinar series is to look after yourself. Mental health is a very emotive topic because it affects all of us in different ways, and we can't predict how it's going to impact different people who are watching the webinar series. Now, everything's been designed to be delivered in a sensitive way and to hopefully not evoke any emotions, but just be careful in case it does. Now, what we'd advise is that you identify someone now who you can talk to if you need them as you're going through the webinar or if you need a debrief afterwards. So have a think about who that might be and make a note, let them know, and once you're ready, let's get started.
Webinar 1 looks at understanding emotions. So to start with a definition from the American Psychological Society, we'd be looking at emotions as a complex pattern of changes. This pattern includes physiological arousal, so the changes that you experience physically in your body, Feelings, cognitive processes, so your interpretation and thoughts around a certain situation, and a behavioural reaction, so how you might do things differently as a result of that interpretation. So these are all come together in response to a situation that is perceived to be personally significant to the individual. Robert Plutchik is a psychologist who created an evolutionary theory of emotions and this emotion wheel. It's a useful tool to show the different emotions. So Plutchik's theory shows 8 basic emotions: joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. So each of those in the wheel also is shown in varying intensity. So in the middle, where the colour is darker, it's a more intense level of that emotion, and as it moves outwards and becomes paler, it's a less intense version of that emotion. So you can see how that can be adaptive to the situation and adaptive to the circumstances and for the person. In between each as well is that combination of emotion where those things cross over, and the wheel also shows the relationship between different emotions and shows the interaction with them, and each one faces its opposite polar emotion. It helps us to see the relationship between our emotions and the complexity and level of emotion that we can feel. So let's think about emotional links. A lot of the time people think that emotions come from nowhere. I just felt anxious, I just felt angry. But it's really useful to see emotions as linked to all of these factors. So starting with the stimulus event. This can be a real event or an imagined event. So something could actually physically happen in front of you, or somebody could say something or do something, or it could also just be something that you thought of, a memory, a flashback, even a smell that's triggered something in your mind. You will interpret that as either good, bad, indifferent. You might not even acknowledge it at all, but if you're interpreting that, and it might be based on previous experience, it might be based on something that's upset you in the past or that's made you feel a certain way in the past. It might be based on your values, on your expectations, but that interpretation will be there. And that will then lead to a feeling. So that feeling could be positive, negative, neutral, but a feeling state will be aroused and a behaviour will result from that. So whether that be an active behaviour or a passive behaviour, a behaviour will arise from that. And then from behaviour, we know the outcome comes from that too. So it's a really nice chain analysis to see where that sort of come from and look at what came before, what then happened, and then what the consequences were. So just to show an example here, the stimulus event is a bear walks into the area that you are standing in, and your immediate interpretation of that situation would be, this is dangerous for me, I am not safe here. This would then lead to that feeling state of fear, which would then lead to the fight or flight response and your brain telling your body to escape the situation, and the outcome would be safety. So the brain was right. Here's some more examples, and there's a positive example there. So the stimulus event, you find £2 on the floor, and the interpretation is, that's mine. So you get it and you feel happy, like, nice one, found £2. And then your behaviour is to keep it, I'm going to keep that, and the outcome is that you are £2 richer. Thinking about then, perhaps a less favourable stimulus is you're splashed by hot water. So your immediate interpretation is, what was that? And it would be a surprise. It would cause you to stop, and then the outcome would be that you would get some time to figure it out and sort of realise, actually, am I okay here? Emotional literacy is a term used quite regularly. So if we think about the definition of that as being the ability to understand your own emotions, and also the ability to listen to others, to empathise with their emotions, and the ability to express emotions productively. So what are you going to do with those emotions in order to change the outcomes, and how are you going to show those emotions effectively to match the situation? This table breaks it down a little bit. So from the top there, having the ability to understand your emotions. Moving down then to be able to listen to others and to empathise with their emotions. Knowing how to manage our own emotions and to improve personal power as a result of that. And being able to repair emotional problems when they arise, which they will. but having the ability to repair those effectively, constructively, and to move on from that will create a memory in your brain that enables you to do that repeatedly and adapt that to different situations. And then putting it all together to demonstrate emotional interactivity. This comes from Achieving Emotional Literacy by Steiner and Perry, if you did want to read more into that. So looking at the benefits of emotional literacy, we'd be looking at improved positive relationships with minimal arguments. So for young people with good emotional literacy, they'd be clear over who is in control of their behaviour. So that other people can create that stimulus, but ultimately they are then in charge of how they respond to that. So being able to express that control over their emotions, to also, be able to let go of and repair emotional disagreements when they occur, because they will, that's life. But to be able to exercise self-control during those heightened emotional states and still act in accordance with their own values. They would have heightened experience of love, joy and hope. So to be able to sort of experience that fully and retain that pleasure that they get from that. To be able to focus, improved overall psychological well-being, which promotes their own self-esteem as well. They'd be able to empathise, show consideration for others as well, which helps with friendships and connections with other people. And just that increased capacity to achieve and contribute to society and their own personal life. This slide shows some building blocks towards improving emotional literacy. So using books to explain emotions, you can do this with books to explain themed topics. You can use books that use that language. So there are lots of certainly preschool books, but when we're preschool and primary age books, even up to sort of older primary age. But if we're looking at secondary, also using those books that you have in class, using the stories that are told, using the situational examples, labelling the emotions in the stories, so identifying the emotions in the stories, asking questions, what would you have done, what could you have done differently, how would you feel if that was you. But then you can also help them to use word pairs to help with expression. So word pairs help to provide blocks for problem solving as well. So you might be able to teach them word pairs such as same and different, such as can or can't, such as before and after. So using those word pairs to compare. So somebody might say that they're really excited about an upcoming topic, and other people might say, yeah, same. But there might be somebody who says, I feel different to that, and then we can ask questions about that, and it provides a prompt. If they know these word pairs and they know these prompts, then they know that that's an in to be able to share, and then questions can come, and then we can sort of explore what could be done about that. Practicing regulation, so showing how we manage our emotions, so things we can do when we're stressed, things that we can do when we're anxious, things we can do when we're upset, things we can do when we're happy. So practicing how we regulate our emotions to the situation, and doing that regularly, not just when a problem occurs. That can be done in the classroom, and adults using that terminology and using those skills is a really good aspect of modelling, something that can be done in school and at home. It's okay for us to recognise as adults that we have strong emotions too, and not to expect our children not to have them. We have bad days and so do they, but we can help to model what we're going to do with that, and to regulate that together, to ask questions and to build on that language together. So here are some whole class ideas for emotional literacy. So classroom displays, themed topics, assemblies, workshops, webinars, anything really that sort of draws that attention and uses that language, uses those tools and makes them commonplace in the classroom. Encouraging children to write or draw thoughts and feelings, and also to reward when that is spoken about. So we reward that good behaviour in class, but we also want to reward the other behaviours that we want to see more of. So I can see that you were really upset about that, but you did really well to get on and have a good try. I could see that you were worried there. Do you want to talk about that? Because actually maybe we could do something different next time. So when they have shown and displayed that emotion, to reward that with that attention and connection, and build that up as something that is desirable and is helpful. Using films to talk about feelings and emotions, certainly games, role plays, building in those opportunities to show that it is normal and we all have emotion and it's okay to speak about it and it's okay to feel things. And actually, feelings are really important. Feelings are useful. We need them. They drive us towards action. They drive us towards change. They highlight a problem to us. But it's also important to help children recognise patterns and recognise existing emotions. So, for instance, if we're already feeling nervous and anxious and worried and stressed, then we're more likely to interpret the situation to fit that narrative. So it's essential to sort of be aware of that and to sort of check in and understand your own sort of biases and sort of see what might trigger that to escalate. So we can help young people to recognise that recurrence. So for instance, if there's a test and before every test that young person is getting really, really worked up and stressed, and they're, in their mind they're thinking, well, I'll fail because I always fail, then that's sort of building on a recurring pattern, like I will always feel this way. But you can teach them that actually you can challenge that reaction, and that doesn't have to be the fact. Emotions are not always facts. Emotions are feelings. They don't necessarily fit the fact, but often because we feel a certain way, we think it must be true. And so we can actually help young people to identify that they can challenge that. It doesn't have to be the fact. It doesn't have to be the truth. And emotions are just one aspect of the situation and being able to gather that information about the world. So they can also help us to focus and motivate us to sort of, actually, I'm feeling this way, so I'm going to do something about that's going to be helpful. So they can actually be really useful as well, rather than just that stock response of, okay, well, I'll avoid that feel because it doesn't feel great. But actually, if we recognize what it is and we understand it, it might help us to take a more positive course of action that would help. So if we're talking about emotional regulation, thinking about definition of emotional regulation referring to the process by which individuals influence which emotions they have. So we can influence them with our thoughts, with our behaviours, with our situational biases as well, consciously or unconsciously. And we can also influence when we have them, how we experience them, and how we express them as well. So as I say, this can be automatic or it can be controlled, and it can be conscious or unconscious. So it can be really varied. And then looking at the opposite of that, emotional dysregulation, as being the inability to deal with those strong emotions, which then can result in unhelpful coping strategies such as self-harm, harmful behaviours, avoidant behaviours as well. Emotions can be seen as negative or scary for young people, and they can be overwhelming, and they might feel that they can't control them. Some young people won't have had that modelled to them effectively. Some young people won't have been given that space to display or share emotion or understand how to do that effectively. So children then might sort of have that stock response of avoiding the situation. Well, I'm just not going to do it. It makes me feel scared, so I'm just not going to do it. And then that might lead to then upset, anger, and that can escalate then as well. We can help young people to develop emotional regulation skills. We can do that by encouraging them to talk about their feelings. So asking questions and being curious about what the answer is, and maybe digging into a little bit further with that. Giving them opportunities to have those discussions and making sure that's offered regularly. Modelling emotional regulation, like we mentioned before, you can sort of express if you're worrying about something. I feel a bit worried about this actually. Does anybody else sort of feel a bit worried? Or, you know what, I got a bit cross there and I should have perhaps handled that a bit differently, and I apologise for that. And what I'm going to do now is this and this to help me to feel a bit calmer, and what we can do together is this and this. So identifying those emotions in yourself as well and acknowledging those. Accepting the way that they tell you that they're feeling. You can normalise this as well. So, you don't immediately have to try and change that or dismiss it. Oh, don't worry about that, it'll be fine, is not usually helpful. Don't worry about it doesn't usually stop you from worrying about it. So you don't immediately have to sort of, try and change that. But equally, you know, you don't need to collude as well, you know, in terms of, oh yeah, you know, that is really worrying. You can help them to understand the situation, to interpret it, to help them see that it is quite normal, and see the situations that might evoke that emotion, that might change their behaviour, that they perhaps then regret, you know, and look at, okay, so what happened? What led to that? How did you interpret that? What did you do? And then what the outcome was. You can help them to sort of look at situations and then try and make changes as well. You can teach them to, you know, feel empowered, that they are in control of their own emotions, that they are in control of their own behaviour, you know, that they can recognise things that they can put in place. So sort of thinking about distractions, you know, we want to be clear the distinction between avoidance and distraction. You know, we don't want to avoid the feeling altogether, but using distractions such as deep breathing, such as relaxation skills, can help just to distract ourselves from that interpretation, developing that big emotion that perhaps doesn't always fit or isn't always useful to the situation. You know, if they don't understand what the emotion is, maybe you can help them. You know, you can use that emotion wheel and perhaps help them to understand that as well. If they don't understand it, maybe you can help them too. You can be calm, you can give them time, you can give them that space to gather their feelings, their thoughts, and reflect on that, and help them to regulate it with that time and space, that healthy outlet. Thinking about the 5 ways to wellbeing that we did in the level 1 training, thinking about how you can include those into your regulation skills. Looking at the bigger picture, so will this matter in a week, a year, 2 years, 10 years? You know, looking at all the other things that are perhaps going on aside from this thing that's perhaps bothering them. You know, and as I mentioned earlier, you know, looking at those mindfulness skills, so that attitude of gratitude, focusing in on the simple things that bring us pleasure and bring us joy, you know, that really help to regulate our emotions when we need it.